2021 Finance and Facilities Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township to order. If we could please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we hit the agenda, it is Veterans Day today, and I'd just like to acknowledge that and to thank all our veterans for their public service. And with that, we'll turn the meeting over to Martha.
Thank you, sir. This evening we're starting with an item on the capital construction financing. We're getting an update from PFM. Our presenter is Jamie Schlesinger, and he's taking the podium.
Hopefully you can hear me. Good, that works. Good evening. Good to see everybody. I know this has been years for some of us to see me physically, so it's good to be here. Well, I'm here tonight to talk about the next step of the capital plan for the school district. The last few times I've been here, we've discussed refinancing opportunities or additional borrowings for the high school and the elementary schools. I understand recently the board's heard an update of the costs of the projects. So tonight we're going to talk about what those steps are and how we plan on doing it. This is going to fall within line of how we thought about it from the beginning. The idea was just to continue to tack on an additional borrowing for approximately $10 million. And as the time goes on, assuming cash flow works, we would potentially do another transaction to kind of clean up things. So nothing out of the ordinary, but so far so good based on how our plan's going to work. So I'm asking you to turn to the second page, which I know many of you have seen this many times before. This is our interest rate chart, or MMD, just to give you an idea of what the market looks like. We've been in a good place from an interest rate standpoint. It's gone up a little bit over the last few months. We're starting to see a little bit of bumps here and there. There's discussions of tapering of our treasuries and such. So, there's going to be some impacts, I think, in the market. Things are starting to get built in. At this point, nothing alarming. We haven't seen any major spikes. And based on what we're planning on doing, we'll be able to kind of hedge the next round of funding to kind of lock in at extremely good interest rates overall. Anyone have any questions on this page? Again, nothing shocking here, but kind of keeping in line with what we've been seeing.
I was just going to translate for the public's benefit who don't have the handout that it's a graph that shows historical rates going back to 1993 with a pretty solid downward trend, and the period 2020 to 21 with just a blip of an exception denotes the low point in the interest rates that are shown on the graph. So we are in a historically low rate environment, even with some more recent slight trending up, but it's still a solidly lower rate than what we've seen over the last 20, 30 years. Exactly
right, yeah. Just as backdrop, when we first started talking about these particular projects going back to kind of the 2017 range, we estimated higher interest rates. So as we've kind of been doing the transactions, it's kind of assisted with the blending down of the millage impact. So even everything we talk about tonight, I think we're going to be at a better position than what we originally discussed several years ago. So the plan is working, and hopefully we can kind of finish this up at a strong pace. The next page, page 3. I don't have any good news for you on refinancing opportunities. I can't do anything right now. Your next opportunity would be in 2024. So we may be able to kind of squeak it in at the end of 2023, depending on timing. But there's really nothing we can do right now to save you any additional money. We've kind of taken care of most of it. Obviously I'll watch and let you know if there's any opportunities, but nothing to do right now. Just in general, if you look at the bottom of this chart, you have a number of issues outstanding, the most recent being in 2021. The total principal balance of the district as of today is just under $135 million. The annual debt service is about $12 million a year. Again, the structuring of how we're doing this is a wrap structure, so we'll continue to keep adding on, and you'll see the next few pages how it'll look. But, in the end, the millage impact and how things are kind of blending in from a phase-in is working exactly as we'd like. And again, overall, your debt does, eventually disappear at this point in 2037 fiscal year, which, it's a long time away, but it's really not that long in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about capital financings in buildings. So, that's why your credit rating is quite strong, and, you're able to kind of handle these type of transactions.
We'll have the 2037 class of kindergartners in our buildings not that long from now. I was just going to ask a question. With the total principal that we already have of about $135 million, I think for individual homeowners that are thinking about, like how much should they pay for their home, and there's often kind of a ratio about, how much compared to their income. Since the district has a annual budget of about just under this $135 million, our budget's in the $120 million range. Is there kind of a rule of thumb about, are we over borrowed, or is that a comfortable amount?
Yeah, you're comfortable is the answer. Between the township, the school district, and the county in general, you're at a reasonably good position. Schools go in cycles, as we all know. I think kind of once we get through this, you'll have a cycle probably of not doing many major borrowings, and some of this will be paid down. So again, the rating agencies feel that you're in a strong position from a debt structure and a debt standpoint, and that's part of the reason why your rating is so strong. So as a potential person moving to the town, I think you should feel comfortable that, yes, it's $130 million, that's a lot of money, but kind of given the revenue size and wealth of this area, this is more than comfortable to handle this.
Thank you.
So on to the fun page, which everyone has seen a number of times. You got to turn it sideways. Unfortunately, it keeps getting smaller because we keep adding financings to it, but this is the plan of finance from day one. I won't kind of highlight each color here, but as you can see, when we first started this, we did our first transaction in 2018. Once this is all said and done, as I'll talk about, we're going to do a total of 6 steps, although there'll be kind of, some of these had multiple financings for multiple purposes, but each color kind of signified when we did it, and in most of these cases, we've obviously locked in much of the debt service. Based on, the conversation with with Martha and the rest of the team, there's an expectation we're going to need approximately, don't quote me exactly, about $14, maybe $15 million in total to kind of finish up everything we need to do. That's not just the capital projects for the buildings. That also includes potentially more bus financing. The decision about doing the buses doesn't need to be made tonight. You might recall the last time we did a financing, we included approximately $1 million for buses. You can do those at least 2. We had some reasons for that. Again, from a budgetary standpoint, we built it in so you can look at it. But if the buses turn into a lease, we can pull this out, or we can kind of show it a different way. But I wanted to at least give you an idea of the impacts if you're going to borrow money for buses and kind of the next step of capital needs for the two schools.
Could you toss in a few bus drivers in that deal?
That I can't help you with, unfortunately. Well, maybe at some point we won't need bus drivers. Who knows? With the self-automated, buses, who knows? Yeah. Not these days, though.
So we've borrowed about $55 million starting in 2018 through ones that we've done earlier this year. Yep. And there's $15 million of financing. Perhaps, Martha, could you just give a couple bullet points about the uses of that $15 million, what those capital projects are, as a recap for folks?
The bulk of the $15 million would be used for the climate control project at Coopertown and Chatham Park, with a portion of it also being used to finish off high school phase 2.
And while you're writing this, just remember, we've been doing these in steps for a couple of reasons. Number one, we've been able to take advantage of what is called bank qualification. You've heard that term a bunch of times, but the idea behind that is when you borrow less than $10 million in a calendar year, the school district gets a benefit for multiple things. Number one, depending on the market, and it's usually the market works for you, you get lower interest rates at that time because the investors of the bonds have a special exemption for the interest, and essentially gets passed on to you as an issuer. So that's one and the most important. Second, with bank qualification, the call provision, the option of the school district to refinance debt is actually shorter in Pennsylvania than it is anywhere in the country, which is actually a good thing. That would be a 5-year call provision. So that just means that I'll be here more often, hopefully, to refinance your future debt should market rates occur. So that 5 years also has value. And the third, and I think most important for this particular conversation, is we don't have the exact total of what the final cost of the projects will be. So what we didn't want to do is go borrow everything today and then come back and say, oh, you know what, it's going to be $1 million or less or whatever, you have funds from somewhere else. Here we can do piece number one, handle the cash flow associated with that, and then come back next year and do the cleanup issue. And I think you'll be able to do both the transaction bank qualified, and again, now you've hedged another $7 million of a good market. So that's the rationale behind it. If, Martha said to me, hey, I need this money because we need to spend it within the next 9 months, I would say something different, but we think we're going to be able to push the next these projects over the next couple years-ish or so. And we can be flexible in doing that second transaction when we're ready to go. The last thing I will point out, and just for purposes of discussion, the millage equivalent, this will move a little bit depending on the value of the millage of the district, as things get better from an economic standpoint. But the expectation at a conservative estimate on both the orange and the blue, and again, these are still not financed yet. We have conservative interest rates in here. The expectation is you'll need about 0.7, God, I can't see anymore, 0.76 mils to kind of cover everything. You've handled much of this already, but that's the total of projects. That's higher than the last time I was here, but again, the projects are a little bit more expensive than at this point for the changes in the use of the projects. But I believe this expectation is lower than what we originally had starting in 2017. That's because the assumed interest rates that we had at that time was conservative enough that the differences won't be dramatic. So again, affordability we can do here, and we'll be able to handle the additional capital needs. I'll stop answering questions on this page, and then the next page will be about the timeline.
And on that millage rate, when you say 0.76 mils, that is the cumulative effect, not, as the chart shows, we're not hit with that all at once.
No, it's because we've been doing this in phases, you're able to kind of phase in that impact, and that's the benefit of doing this. So one, we have an assumption of what your millage value is, and then two, yes, we can phase it in. And we've done a few things to kind of help offset things. And understand this is just debt service. I know you guys have to run a school district which has other things that you have to plan for, but related to the debt itself, this is what is debt should be dedicated for this particular set of projects from day one.
For these, I guess it's 7, 8, 9, right? Is the orange and the blue on this spreadsheet? You said the interest rates that you were using to calculate these were on the conservative side.
Yes.
What interest rate are you using?
It's probably close to 3%.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
so
that's very
we're
conservative
high,
compared to where
yes.
we're at now. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yes.
Okay.
I like to come in with good news usually, but, just in the sense of, since this is for planning purposes and we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Especially if we're going to wait a
Absolutely.
year and a half or so.
Yeah.
Let's be high. So I'll more than likely will do that next tranche. I'll update the numbers. You'll see, oh my God, it's much lower now on your impact. And then the next transaction, we'll see where it shakes out. But yeah, we're pretty conservative.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, we like when you come in with the lower numbers. That's,
Yes.
that's always good news.
Yeah, I don't like being chased out of the place. I just like coming in.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sure. And then the last page, unless there's any other questions on this page, is just the plan timeline. We understand, obviously you have end of the year, what is needed, but the plan here is to kind of work backwards. We'd like to get the money locked in, in a reasonable manner. In our world, generally speaking, kind of doing a financing, kind of January, early February is usually a good thing. If anyone took economics back in the good old days, we called it the January effect. That is kind of true in our environment. So we're going to try to move in a pace where we're going to lock in interest rates, hopefully sometime early to maybe mid-February. So what that means is we'd like to come back with a formal parameters resolution at your board meeting on January 20th. But between kind of now and then, I'd like to get that process started to get the offering document prepared. We'll end up going to the credit rating agency and do the necessary things to kind of get it ready. And then once we have everything approved, we'll get to the market as quickly as we can after that.
Jamie, for the benefit of the public, and we also have some of our newly elected board members with us this evening, could you just tell us a little more about what a parameters resolution is?
Sure. Yeah, that's anyone that's new to the board will go, oh my God, these are crazy numbers. So the way it works is in Pennsylvania, we have to follow certain rules under the Local Government Unit Debt Act. That's essentially the rules and conditions to issuing debt in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Those rules, you need to follow certain categories. One, you have to do certain advertising, both pre and post adoption of a resolution. That's just in general. But second, you have to meet certain conditions under the Debt Act. And when we do something called a parameters resolution, what that means is we are asking the board to consider approving a resolution before we price the bonds. Because what we want to have as an advisor and anyone that we're doing a transaction with, we want flexibility to go to the market when we think is best served, whether that's as quickly as possible if the market changes. And two, we want to make sure that we get an approval from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we have to come in with a higher principal amount than what we really are going to borrow, a higher interest rate than we are planning on issuing, and that's usually based on a coupon. So you'll see a 5% interest rate, and I just mentioned that we assumed maybe 3%. We have to show a higher amount, and then we also have to show a maximum maturity, our final maturity. So that would be the assumption of what we think the final maturity will be. There's a couple other things that go along with it, but the main pieces that you as a board will see is these higher borrowing amount, higher interest rate, and the maturity. Understand that it's impossible for us to kind of get to any of all of those things, but we have to have the most wide range to make sure we fit the standards of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's only true because we would not be going to market until after. And that's why we do it that way.
Thank you.
That said, again, because you have an audit coming, which will hopefully be done toward the end of the year, we would do that, that particular piece. We'd go to the credit rating agency, we'll have a conversation with them, tell them all the good things that have gone on at the district. Hopefully we'll maintain the AA2 credit rating, which was upgraded a year or so ago. And assuming all those things happen and we don't see anything major, again, our goal is to get to pricing sometime at the early February, maybe mid-February. Depends how fast we can turn things around. That's the plan. Any questions, comments? I think the only thing I will point again, kind of go back to, we would need to know prior to the resolution if you are going to include the buses or not in the document, because we have to mention it as part of a purpose. So we don't need to decide today, but that's something that we'll need to know. I've reached out to the bond council already, so they're aware of this. Again, my team will start to work on things as well, and we'll be ready to go when you guys are ready to go.
And that's for by January 20th, that?
Yeah, so we're going to need to know before that, because there's the advertisement you kind of have to make, and then they have to draft the document as well. So if you can figure that out, I would say by the end of the calendar year, that would be great. I know that gives you a little bit of pressure, but I think
at the next finance facilities meeting, I was intending to bring in Kevin, our director of transportation, to discuss lease versus purchase on buses for the coming year. So the timing will work.
Questions? I guess if it's okay with you, I know we've been through this a bunch of times. I know this is not, you don't have to vote or anything, but is everyone nodding that this sounds like a good plan and we can get started? Okay, great. The board's be coming back to us a separate bid between now and the January 20th. That's my, or January, yeah, that's my goal. Not I don't like to see it, but avoiding it would be great. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, to move on to the next agenda item, we've had different people come in and present relative to solar and doing a solar installation on one of our elementary buildings. And I felt that it was necessary to provide some information relative to our energy as well as what we should be looking for relative to a solar agreement. So I reached out and contacted Provident Energy, who is the broker for our energy purchases, to provide us with some basic information relative to how energy works and the possible proceeding with the solar panels. So John Young is here from Provident Energy, and he is going to provide us with a wealth of information.
Thank you for the time and for the introduction, Martha. I'm John Young with Provident Energy. Joe Solomon with Provident Energy. We've worked with the district since the early 2000s on energy procurement and other energy needs. I'm particularly happy to be here. I was born and raised in Haverford Town. I have 5 siblings in the district, so it's special for me to be here with you guys, and I appreciate it. So we're going to go through a couple things, just talk in general about how electricity gets to us, talk about the cost drivers, have a little PPA review, talk about renewable energy credits, and then some other things that you can be thinking about as a district along the green idea avenue. This graphic right here represents at a very high scale how energy gets to us, right? So PECO has a distribution system of poles and wires and meters and service techs and so forth, and they're really responsible for maintaining how the electricity gets into your building from the street and into the local area. The blue line delineates supply side, right? So energy deregulation that came on in earnest around 2011 in PECO, but really was put into law in 1997. It effectively breaks up PECO's local monopoly, right? No one's going to come here and run a bunch of wires and substations for us. But the other side of the coin, where you have the actual generation of electricity, like the power plants, none of them are around here, obviously, out in different areas, and then the transmission system of high tension wires, high voltage wires that go across the countryside that look somewhat like that you're familiar with. They're all implemented and managed, and the market for the electricity on that side is managed by PJM, which stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland Interconnection. They're based up in Valley Forge. They manage the electric grid for like 13 states in the District of Columbia, all the way out to Chicago, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, into the Carolinas, as far west into Kentucky. They're in charge of managing the reliability of that. They make a market for electricity so we can go buy it, right? They also ensure that the system is robust enough that it can meet the needs of the most stressful days, right? So there's a lot of costs that go into, especially the generation and the transmission portions of that. And they're assigned to you based upon how you use energy. And I'll get into that a little bit deeper, but it's important for us to understand there's 2 sides of the coin. There's the local monopoly of PECO. They're going to charge you for the delivery of it. The other side is that how's it get to you, how's it generated, right? That's the supply side. This is a bill. This bill is, even it says 50 Eagle, it's actually from Manoa Elementary. This is one of the bills that Martha had sent over recently when she had a question on some back charges from PECO. As you can see here, this is the demonstration of those 2 sides of that coin that I showed. The first section there says PECO electric delivery has a customer charge and distribution charges, right? These are charges that are assigned to you by the local utility. That's where they make their profit. That's where they pay for the infrastructure. What's important to note here is first of all, it's a sizable amount. Secondly, the charges are largely for these commercial accounts found in what's called KW, right? Kilowatts, as opposed to kilowatt hours. Kilowatts are how much energy you use at any one given time, right? Kilowatt hours are the total amount of energy that you use. The way I like to explain is if you're trying to fill a pool in your backyard, You could use a garden hose and it might take you 3 days. If you use a fire hose, much bigger, right? It might take you 3 hours or 10 hours, depending upon the size. It's going to be much faster. The reason they charge you for the size of your hose in KW is because they have to have a hose somewhere that fills all that, right? So there's tremendous amount of infrastructure costs to meeting the peak demands of everybody. So the way they do it is actually, you see, they charge you for how much you use at any one given time, your peak at any moment during the month, and then they actually, in the next line, give you a little bit of a discount for how big your pool is, right? So as you can close the ratio between pipe and pool, you do a little bit better. There's also a charge that you pay attention to down at the bottom there called the energy efficiency charge. This is where all their PICO rebate money comes from. They charge folks, and they give it back to those folks that can go and replace light bulbs and so forth. Below that, where you see the Constellation, Constellation is your supplier, right? That is, they handle the procurement of the actual electrons from a generating source, and they actually handle all the payments for your accounts for those PJM infrastructure costs, right? That transmission capacity. That's represented there in the line item called market charges, right? So you can see that rate of 3.3208, 3.208 cents. That's just for the energy portion, right? That's the portion of the bill that you went on with like 60 other school districts and IUs, all the schools in Delaware County, just about all of them in Chesco, majority of Monco, who am I forgetting? Chesco? Yeah, Bucks. A great deal of the Bucks ones, about 60 or 70 other schools in the Lehigh area, Harrisburg and so forth. We really concentrate on that PICO price right here. So that's where you get the group purchasing from the DCIU, the group purchasing, the joint purchasing actions that they take. That's the value you see there. Because in this particular month, you're paying like 3.68 cents all in from your supply side. Now, this is going to be a month where if you use less kilowatt hours, right, those market charges only change about once a year, depending upon your usage history, right? So they could go up to 500, they could go down to 200, but if the usage changes, the actual effective rate changes just a little bit. That's that line item where I say fixed costs versus variable costs. Well, that market charge does change depending upon the number of days in the period and so forth, but it's more or less a fixed charge for a year. So if you took that across the whole district, you might be 4.5 cents for the whole district, but in this case, in this account, because you've done a good job driving down your peaks, you see an effective rate that's under 4 cents. So hopefully that makes some sense to folks. Those market charges, as I say, they're capacity and transmission, and they drive a significant portion of your costs.
Sorry, could I just ask, you said you're seeing the market rate of about 4 cents. Can you point to where that is? Is that the combination of both or just?
Yeah, so if you took the 117,000 kilowatt hours and change, added everything in the supply section where it adds up to like $4,315, right?
Okay.
$43.15, and you divide that by the kilowatt hours, right? It should be about 3.68 cents.
Okay.
Right, so the supply side. So this is important to understand that you have that size of pipe thing, but you also have a whole supply side of it, right? Because this is going to come into play when we talk about solar. What is affected here and what's not, right? There can be the both sides that are affected, but the most directly affected thing is going to be that 3208 line item there, right?
Right, that's what we have some say in who we select as our energy supplier, and as you said, the negotiation or consortiums, that's what is affected with the supply choices.
Right, exactly. So, the comparable thing would be all those supply charges versus some other rate, if that makes sense, but only on the supply side.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Yeah, certainly. I'm learning this clicker here. So, go on to the next slide here, some basics about power purchase agreements. Power purchase agreements are just the agreement to buy the production of electricity from an asset that someone else owns, right? Well, why do you need the third party, right? Well, before we get there, when you're in a solar agreement, you're typically going to produce more times than you're using. And at that point, that's where the net metering comes in. That's where PECO's grid is actually acting as a storage receptacle for your excess energy. When your energy goes out to the grid, PECO's maintaining that number. You start using more, that number goes down. There's a true-up once a year. So if you overproduce during a given year, they credit you back that excess credit. It's not unlimited, right? I believe it's about 10% more than your historical average. That's how big of an installation you could hope to build. So it's not, you couldn't put a nuclear plant there and expect them to pay you for it, if that makes some sense. So that's the net metering report. That's another reason why you're still going to be attached to PECO, because they have to be the place where you're putting this excess production of your solar array. Why is it owned by third parties? Because as a non-tax paying entity, you can't enjoy all these tax incentives, right? So this investment tax credit currently sits at 26%. So if I pay for it as a third party, if I have a big tax bill, like a hedge fund or a large bank or something like that, I can get money back by assuming that tax credit, right? Because I've done this installation, I can save 26% of that money in a direct tax credit. There is some movement and desire for that to become just a straight money item where you don't have to do it as part of your taxes to offset some other taxes. And that way, if that does change, it'll take those folks out of the picture. They say we won't need to necessarily have someone who has a big tax debt to shelter behind this. The accelerated depreciation, that's one of those things that's going to put a timeline on this as well, right? So you're going to have 6 years, as this third party, typically to accelerate the depreciation, realize those tax advantages, right? So these are some of the reasons why it would be imprudent for you to buy a solar array as a district, design it, install it yourself. It just doesn't make sense. You can't take advantage of those pieces of it. Another key portion of it is these solar renewable energy credits. There are, Pennsylvania has a thing called the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, where they mandate how much of the electric grid's power in Pennsylvania has to be renewable. Currently, that's 18%. It's sunsetted, it's sitting at 18%. There's carve-outs for the quality of it, there's carve-outs for solar. But as soon as those levels are met, right, they're met through people who buy these renewable energy credits. So I'm a big producer of electricity. I have these plants that burn fossil fuels. I have to get up to 18%. How do I do that? I buy these renewable energy credits, right, which are essentially the green qualities of the energy that's been produced. So in essence, when we produce electricity, we separate the actual electrons and those green qualities, and we commoditize the green qualities into what's called a renewable energy credit. Then we can sell that into a compliance market, right? I go and sell that to someone else who has to be greener to comply with these rules of the state, this AEPS, Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, right? There's also a voluntary market where people buy these because they can't put their own installation in, or they want to be green, or their installation isn't big enough to offset all of their brown power purchases, right? So there's a compliance market and a voluntary market for those renewable energy credits. It's important to note, if you sell those SRECs as part of the funding of your project, you're not allowed to make those green claims. You've sold that right, that you're 100% green. As soon as you sell that, you're not green anymore. You have a green thing set on your roof, but you're not using green power, essentially. And then, of course, there's the generated electricity that they sell to whoever has agreed to have the installation on the property, or wherever it is, right? So those are generally the main resources, or rather revenue sources, for a solar installation in a PPA fashion. I did list a whole bunch of considerations here. I don't want to exactly go through them all. I could come back. I don't want to take too much of your time. I'd be happy to talk more or less, but I am conscious of your time, obviously. The timing and term, like how long is it going to take for us to pay? How long do we have to pay for this? When are we going to install it? There's some concerns now about even getting these PV chips and so forth to, so there's some upward price pressure on that. The size of it, right, if someone's coming to you, what's the maximum amount that we can put in, or that we're comfortable putting in at our building? The rate, certainly, you're familiar with rates. The escalation rate is also a consideration. Who has the rights to the SRECs, right? Do we keep them as a district, or are they sold as part of the financing of this? The technology, there's clearly new technology coming out from solar, whether it be the classic silica-based products or the new perovskite and things of that manner. And then as far as the ongoing maintenance, who's in charge of the inverters, right? Because the inverter takes that solar production, right, and makes it good for use inside the building, right? That's the thing that turns it from direct current to the alternating current that we all know about inside of our buildings, the frequency of it and so forth. That's a maintenance item where if you took it on, you'd be in charge of not only assuring that it's working, right? Someone have to monitor that, you can pay someone to monitor that, but also the ongoing maintenance, and then the life cycle, what happens to it when it's no longer of use to us? How do we get rid of it, right? So just some of the things you think about as you get closer and down the road for getting into a solar installation. This is a long list of things here about renewable energy credits that you can consume as you wish. The key takeaway right here is the renewable energy credit owner has the exclusive rights to make claims about using or being powered with renewable electricity, right? And then the portion down the bottom kind of details that the voluntary market as far as the in comparison to the compliance market, if that makes some sense.
So in this, if we have the solar panels on our roof,
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily mean that we are able to say we are using or being powered with, that's part of the negotiated contract?
Yeah, so you would have to negotiate that. There's been an uptick in the price of renewable energy credits, the solar variety, the wind variety, and so forth, because there's been a push from businesses to not only purchase these things to offset their own usage, right? We did this for Lower Merion, County of Delaware, the County of Montgomery. We went out and bought them renewable energy credits, so they're able to claim that they're 100% renewable, right? That's someone else's production. That's a wind farm somewhere. It's a solar array someplace else, but we're buying the environmental attributes and pairing them up with our usage, right? Because any electricity that's on the grid, you can't earmark it for this location or that location, right? Electricity goes where it goes. So you have to have some sort of step back and ethereal look at it, if you will, abstract look at it. And this is the commoditized version of all those green attributes. So, and also people who are doing these installations themselves as corporations or so forth, they're not selling the RECs as often because they want to be able to make these claims about being green, being renewable. To be clear, it's still something that's producing electricity that's green. You can't take credit for it at that point though, right? So it's just something consideration. How is this going to be represented going forward? What are our goals here, right? So again, those are just considerations, right?
I'm just curious now, the owner of the RECs, I'm assuming would be the owner of, in this case, the solar panels.
Well, right, so this is all part of a negotiation, right? They don't have to. You can have the rights to the renewable energy credits, it just has to be part of your deal, right?
Part of the
It's part of the financing, right? So if you kept the RECs, conceivably, right, the rate should go up, because now we're not missing a very significant revenue revenue portion, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it just affects the cash flow, right? And then, a few details there, obviously, about the voluntary and compliance market. Some considerations going forward, right? Energy utilization intensity, right? Benchmarks. These are the type of things where you look at your buildings and say, how many MMBTUs? Because all the electricity, whatever, natural gas, anything can be converted to power, right? MMBTUs, right? The intensity per square foot, how much is my building using in contrast to, Upper Darby, Radnor, Springfield, whomever, other schools that are similar size, middle schools and other areas. The EPA portfolio manager is a good site for managing these things. We walk districts through getting a better accounting of their energy utilization intensity. We can definitely do that for the district. The greenhouse gas inventory, it's important to kind of know, what type of scope we're talking about. Scope 2 for this electricity that we get off the grid, it's different scopes depending upon your fleet of buses or where you get your pencils from or whatever else. Energy efficiency, right? Any of these climate pledges that we talk about, the number one thing everybody talks about is using less electricity or less energy, right? Whether it be propane, fuel oil, natural gas. The first thing is let's use less. That's been our motto as a company for a long time. Because we have an efficiency arm to it, is use less energy and then pay less for the energy that you do use. So that's what we found to be successful. I guess we have about 30% of the school districts and about 14 county governments in the state.
Sounds like the opposite of what you should normally do in a capitalistic society.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, looking at the way the rates change, it's funny you say that, Eric, because there was a long time in PICO before deregulation where energy got cheaper the more energy that you used. Your first 2,000 kilowatt hours are at X rate. Oh, the next 10,000 will make it cheaper for you. So if you're someone who's actually using energy to produce things, it becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to produce my widgets or what have you. That's changed significantly. And they've really stepped away, except for in residential cases, charging anything of substance for that kilowatt hour usage on the distribution side, because they want to make sure that they can maintain their revenue stream. People can curtail how much energy they use by doing this or that, but if they're not managing how big that pipe is, that has the most direct impact. It's also tougher to do to completely absolve yourself from any of those charges, right? I mean, you could put a bank of batteries out there, that might mitigate it, right? If you shut your things off. Martha gets the emails, JR gets the emails that we send out during the summer to try to advise you when to curtail so you beat some of those grid charges, some of those infrastructure charges. We're sending out like 10 or 12 emails a summer and say, today looks like it could be a PJM peak day. When you bring your load down, when you bring down your KW during those moments, right, you lessen your multiplier for those grid charges, right? Those grid charges are all put in megawatts, right? So if you have 1,000 kilowatts, it's a megawatt. So if you have 1,000 one year, and the next year you're able to curtail, go down to 500, you only pay half of those charges, right? You know, all else being equal. So we try to send out emails to the folks to try and educate them to drop those and you know, save you some money. It's really evident in that bill, right? Because that's unusually low price. I mean, under 4 cents, probably it's a district 4.5. You're doing a good job. You know, some of these folks are doing a good job. For sure. And then, you know, on the right side, what's moving? As I talked a little about the supply constraints, energy clearly is up all across the globe. You know, geopolitically, movements for green, that's affecting the costs of everything. We certainly see some of these things coming in the infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better bill. The thing about those is they're really looking to entice or expand on the grid so it can be more accepting of the solar power. That's going to have an impact. Changing the way those tax credits work, that's going to have an impact, right? If we do as a state join this greenhouse gas initiative, that's going to have an impact. Anyway, I'm sensitive to your time. I could go on for a day or two, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it.
Quick thank you for speaking loudly so we can hear you through the mask.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You mentioned that it was going well, and I'd like to just say a quick thank you to the administration and you know, Martha, you've got some shoes to fulfill with previous business managers and facilities who've done a good job. And thank you to the students and parents who've presented to the board and asked for us to be better stewards, and the township commissioners to be better stewards of our facilities and therefore the environment.
Yeah.
Responsiveness has been great.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources. As I mentioned, the other side of our business is energy efficiency. We just did a big project for Lower Merion. We've done projects for street lighting at Upper Darby, Lower Merion, Ridley. Did a lot of work out of Fair Acres for the county. So we know what we're talking about. We'd be happy to assist you any way we can.
And so I guess that's one of my questions. We've heard from a couple of different groups that have proposals for the solar panels. Is that something that you're able to help evaluate when we get proposals to kind of look at the cost benefits or?
Yeah, we can show you the impact. I mean, the short answer is, right, it's presently, it's going to be a premium. Like, you're going to have to pay more for energy if you go down that road. I can show you, you know, top to bottom what the impacts are. So, like, if you go back to this bill, right, you're going to have charges on here that don't change, right? So they can't be included in the calculation, right? At the end of the day, Haverford pays something for their energy, right? So if we break off a subset of that energy and pay, you know, more for it even still, and then take some of these fixed costs and apply them to a smaller pool of energy, those charges don't go away, right? They're just not included in the equation. So, you know, we're hopeful, right, if this legislation goes on, that these installations will be more viable, right? Certainly the state level is a push for that, for some changes. We absolutely have a history of reviewing these for our clients, right? I have many solar clients currently, especially up in Lehigh Valley. Some of them have vintages to 2009, 2010, and that's why I talk about that escalator, because if you're starting from a, you know, quote unquote losing position monetarily, and then you try to project going forward some escalation that's based on inflation that might not really be tied to energy, right? those folks are paying, in some cases, 14 cents a kilowatt hour now. They're praying for snow to be on their solar array so it doesn't produce anything. Now, the guy that owns it, or the people that own it, certainly want it to produce it this time because it's coming at a premium. So it's just, you have to have a view of it. Does this work on day one? What are the assumptions we're making that they're going to work on forward? What costs are included? What can we say after it's been installed, right? How does this impact our facility in general? So, yeah, we're happy to help you look at those things and give you, what we know.
Thank you.
Can I add something here? I just want to make sure that...
Need to speak at the mic. Thank you.
John knows this stuff cold, so, just my 2 cents. We help clients all the time. We're not just your broker marketer. We're a full-blown energy consulting outfit. We get very involved in energy efficiency. We strongly believe in it. My own background goes back many, many years in that side. But what we are also cognizant of is our responsibility to help you make good decisions on the other green, that's the stuff in your wallet, and being fiscally responsible, et cetera. So, for example, the top side of that bill, we often see solar proposals that our clients ask us to look at, and we don't charge for that. We're your resource. We want you to know that. But, if the sun's not shining and you have a cloudy series of days and a winter storm, and PECO is charging you for the 15-minute period that's going through the pipe, as John alluded to, or the hose, then that demand charge doesn't go away. So, you can't expect that to be a benefit for you. It's really the supply side is which is most comparable. So we would gladly look at anything you'd like us to review. But as we say, when we talk to the environmental advisory committees at Lower Marion Township and whatever, we're very cautious about the wording that's used in the press releases, of what greenhouse gas you're really impacting or which carbon footprint you're impacting. Because if you're buying wind credits from Oklahoma, then you could say that you've impacted the carbon footprint, maybe just not your carbon footprint. So things like that are just subtleties.
Why important to know what you're talking about when you're talking about the types, the scopes of emission, right? So it all plays into it.
We're glad to help you through any of this.
So I was just going to say real quick, thank you again. It sounds like from the presentation that the investment in solar energy and the impact that it makes from a financial perspective are not necessarily aligned all the time. So it depends that there are nuances within the contract and the negotiation that may change both the impact of your own greenness, so to speak, with the renewable energy credit, as well as the impact financially, and that those nuances within the negotiation may change both ends of that. Am I correct in saying?
Yeah, what you're saying is it's very nuanced and very interdependent and dynamic, and that's true. What's important to note, though, is that if you're looking specifically about the fundamental costs of it, right, those things are agreed to in a contract. There's nothing typically, right, and a contract can say anything, to be clear. The typical setup is that someone has the rights to these things, someone pays a rate, and it either escalates or it doesn't. And these are the terms of maintenance, and these are the terms of what happens to the renewable energy credits and so forth, and if there's an out, or if you can purchase it, or these different things. But they're all set up front, right, because it's an investment for someone, so it can't be, well, we'll figure that when we get there. Typically not, right? So there can be impacts to their cash flow, depending upon if the SREC market is worth more, right, or worth less. They're assuming that, in their cash flow, right? But for you should know up front what my expectations are on costs, right? And then compare that to what you're paying. And that's your decision point, right? That and, how much, you've dedicated to being renewable or green in this aspect.
Right,
which is just a portion of it, right?
And it also sounds like that you should also be aware of what you're investing in from the renewable energy credit perspective, because you may wind up in a situation where you cannot claim that yourself as an entity,
Well, so they're set up to be a subsidy for installations, right? I mean, the whole idea of them is to commoditize those things so they can support the production, to incentivize the creation of these things. You know, some people don't care. If you're just putting up grid solar or something like that, you don't need, that doesn't mean necessarily much to you, but it means something to a company that wants to say, we buy 100% renewable. Well, the stuff that's coming to your meter is whatever's coming off the grid, unless you are attached to something, right? That's producing it for you all the time and you're detached from the grid. You can't make those claims physically, right? But you can make those claims by associating this commoditized aspects of greenness, right? I mean, if you go and read that, it's like the green or renewableness is the word that they use, right? And I think that's right from the EPA's website. They said the renewableness of it, right? The virtue of that produced electricity commoditized can go to that market where it's compliance, or you're meeting some mandate from the state, or it can go to people who want to purchase it so they can make those claims, right? Yeah, so that market does vary.
Okay.
The cost of those RECs vary. It could go up. They say it's 27% in 5 years or something like that. Could go up. They change some other rule, could come down. They incentivize grid solar. You're going to be in a tighter market, right? Because there's going to be more of that produced. But generally, it's just a support, right? It's a subsidy.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Final question, you mentioned some of the public sector clients you've been working with on the purchasing side. I'm wondering, have you worked, we have two, I mentioned, we have two groups that have come in to present proposals to us. Have you worked with any of those groups on the contractual?
Well, Martha did share the presentations. I'm familiar loosely with the one, the PCEC or whatever it was, the one that comes from PASA and so forth. You know, we dealt with them before. We didn't find the process that you went through to get that affiliation, if you would, was something that we found beneficial, if that makes sense. I don't want to dig too deep into it. It just didn't make sense for us as a company to go down that road. I don't think that they've done much, so I haven't seen much of it. We certainly heard, just being, you know, watching the local papers and so forth, we certainly heard about the Haverford Coalition. We dealt extensively with the EAC in Lower Merion, you know, and they would reference over here. We met with one of the professors over at Haverford College, and I don't remember his name, but the EAC brought us in to talk with them exactly about all these aspects of, you know, what are we doing, what are we claiming, what's the best move forward, because they really wanted to chart a path, right? They wanted to use a lot of electricity, less electricity. I mean, change those street lights is low-hanging fruit. Pays for itself, right? You use less energy, everybody wins, right? Some of their infrastructure needs and things that we talked to JR about, you know, he's putting these different drives on some of your HVAC equipment. That's reducing costs, right? It's making you efficient, it's making your stuff last longer and work better. So we're involved in all those type of things, you know, through our project side and our efficiency consulting. So yeah, we have dealt with similar people, but not these ones in particular.
Okay.
We've done energy projects all over the place. And we will do solar if it's embedded in a project, if it makes sense. We'll do it ourselves. The company that I noticed on your, when I watched your meeting, like last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, we represent that one school district in the Poconos that fellow represented. They haven't done a deal yet, but that's my client. So, and you're my client, and you've been our client for almost 20 years. So, you know, we like to educate every client. An educated client is a great client. We look to help you, like I said, reducing your carbon footprint, there's nothing better than you can do than change your lights and put LEDs in, or as John said, VFDs on your HVAC equipment, and you know, your new chiller, your new boiler. For Rose Tree Media School District, we not only air condition Pencrest A and B wing, but we instituted a natural gas vehicle program for the transportation vehicles. So they pull up right to where they fill their diesels, and they now put natural gas in them. Well, Marion School District's our client. They have a transportation bus fleet. And it's interesting because it's really all about energy efficiency. And if you want to supplement that with solar, even that 18% that John showed on a slide there before for the alternative energy portfolio standard, much of that is hydro. So we have existing hydro. Hydro's cheap. It's been around forever and ever. The solar component of that is what, 1%?
0.5%.
0.5% right now. Now, the state is trying to do a lot to up those standards and so on. And there are some exciting, quite frankly, initiatives in review. Senate Bill 472 in Pennsylvania, and there's a new House bill. The House bill's been changing regularly. I think there's 4 different iterations of it over the past year. One of my good friends is actually on the Consumer Affairs Committee that has that bill right now. And there could be some opportunities for you to invest in your solar vision with some type of systems that are out there where you become a subscriber to a solar installation. And I don't want to get too into that right now by any means, but we're well versed in all of these things, the energy efficiency side, the purchasing side, natural gas, electricity, and we're very happy to work with Martha and the administration and all of you.
Okay, and so some of the low-hanging fruit that you mentioned, some of that is being done. We're doing controls improvements,
Right.
we're doing climate improvements, all that is being done. I guess
Excellent.
if we're getting back to the solar issue, the reason why we find that to be a intriguing now is because we built some new school. We built a brand new school that had a brand new roof. We're going to be replacing roofs on another school in the future. If we're going to do it, despite the what the current market is, as you're discussing, now would be the time to actually do that from an infrastructure standpoint. I guess what I would like to see at some point is really breakdown of we have 2 groups who are offering it to install it at no capital cost, essentially upfront at least. I'd like to see comparison really of what the costs down the road look like under each of the models for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That would help us, I guess, to come to a decision really on which one would be best for a district, for the taxpayers, for the environment and everything else. So a lot of low-hanging fruit. I think we're addressing a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think we're willing, I speak for myself anyway, I think a lot of us are willing to take that next step.
Right. So, I mean, part of our job is doing projections, right? But they're more like budget projections and year to year and showing the
Yeah, I
impacts.
mean, it wouldn't be exact, but I mean, we want to get a general idea. What are some of the, I mean, we have one group who basically you continue to pay your costs to them, it's CEC.
Yeah.
And after a certain number of years, you purchase essentially, or you pay off the cost of those panels, and then you become the owner of those panels and get the energy as long as the sun keeps on rising. The other model is the coalition model, where you essentially they own the panels in perpetuity, and we just pay what they say to pay, but they're in charge of O&M in perpetuity. So I mean, I guess the question would be, if we're looking at those models, what would the cost impacts be long-term for a district under each? And that would help us, I mean, that's the kind of thing I think that would really help to inform us to get to a vote and to move this along.
Right. So if we go back to the revenue generators, right, or the things that we would consider offsets for your spend, some of those things, right, we know if we get into a PPA, we know what the rate's going to be. We know if there is an escalator, what that's going to be. So and then you generally know what the production of the array is going to be, right? It has some sort of, loses its viability a little tiny bit year after year. And there are a couple, as I mentioned, like the inverter, there are some maintenance items. And there's the aspect that those folks are monitoring it, because if it's not producing, they're not getting paid. There's some comfort in that being someone else's responsibility. If you have folks that are willing to invest and sell back to you at some point at a discount to what maybe the market is, that certainly sounds advantageous. I mean, the challenge is for anybody projecting that out is you have to make a bunch of assumptions, right? So we don't, without a crystal ball, I would be beating the cold weather coming for sure. on this, but, so if I knew exactly what the energy markets are going to look like, I can tell you that it's going down and down and down, right? And it may not, conceivably do that forever, right? Probably not. But anytime you make assumptions on something that isn't a winner out of the gate, you just have to assign the cost, right? You have to say, this is what it's going to cost me to do this. And that's justifiable, or it's not, right? So we can do it at, hey, energy raises at 1% or 2% or 5%, the PPA raises at some percentage. This is some fixed number that we're going to buy about, and we know what it's producing. So at that point, just going to be a matter of math, right? And then you have to assign some value to it, right? And put some IRR or NPV to it, right? And then assign that out into the future. And then that's your decision to make.
Sure.
That's not difficult to do, but it's based upon assumptions, right? It's like a lot of assumptions.
No, totally understood. I'm an engineer. We look out 20, years with predicting traffic. I understand that. I guess what I'm looking for is just some kind of guidance as opposed to an actual cut and dry.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Sorry.
Dave, we had already spoke to John in Provident Energy to try to do a comparison between the two proposals that we have.
Okay.
We just weren't prepared to bring it tonight.
I appreciate that.
What we did was we wanted to bring information tonight about what this means and how we need to look at it. So
Just want to make sure that.
we'll be getting back together again to do the comparison.
Okay, great.
The one thing that we don't want to be viewed at is the bad guy. I'll be straight up. We'll gladly look at the proposals that you have and show you what the assumptions. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. We'll gladly look at the proposals, but again, sometimes the answers aren't attractive to whatever mission that you may want to proceed. We don't care. Our job is to show you the accuracy of Plan A, Plan B, and where you are currently, and where we think the futures may be. We're energy consultants. I'm an engineer also. I'm a finance guy myself. So that's what our job is to tell you the truth and tell you also what we think might be coming on the horizon. And it could be cold fusion in 10 years. And then what do you do with these things? So just, you might have a glass of water on your desk and you're good. So thank you for your time.
Here's to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and again, we're a resource, so any questions you have.
We'll be back in touch.
Appreciate your time very
This
much.
was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
In this way, right?
Well, it sounds like we're all in it together, huh? On planet Earth.
Okay. The next thing on the agenda was an update on Lenwood, and this is almost tongue-in-cheek because obviously Linwood's open and it looks wonderful. But there's two items that have come to the attention and have been discussed many, many times, and I wanted to bring them back to you. I didn't know if you had the slides or not. But one was the Lenwood sign.
I thought you were going to be changing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I can, of course. Which one?
One is the Linwood sign, and the other one is the wall outside of Linwood. What do we have first?
So this actually shows the panels at the
Just in
retaining
case
wall.
anybody doesn't know, this is Randon.
Yes,
He is-
I'm Randon Petray. I work with CB Development with Ken Matthews. He unfortunately couldn't be here tonight.
And he was responsible for overseeing the Linwood project, so
Right.
he knows the building really well. One of the issues we had, and we have these slides here, the current picture is the current Linwood sign, correct?
Yes, so it has Lenwood Elementary from bottom going up, which the architect, in terms of driving by the school, it's easy, I guess, visually to read it from bottom going up, was the
Clever.
intent of the signage.
I think if you go to the next slide, it shows the problem.
And then, yes, this is that view off Lawrence Road, as you're driving by the school.
It's Wood Elementary, in essence.
Yes, well,
Right, going from bottom to top there, yeah, okay.
So we've had many, many discussions about we need to change the sign because Wood Elementary isn't really the name of the building. So what's the next slide is what was proposed as a possible solution amongst many, but this is the one we think is the clearest from most directions.
Correct, which is basically Lenwood with the letters from the top of the building going down. So that it's visual not only from the main entrance, but also as you're driving, in terms of reading up to down, you would be reading up to down as opposed to down to up.
So,
Have we received complaints about this?
I wonder.
Is this something like a thorn in someone's side?
It was,
I've driven by and, I mean, I've seen it pretty clearly and I think it looks great. My second question is this gonna cost us money to fix?
yes.
To answer your questions, the first question is, it was an item reviewed with the principal. In terms of cost to fix, it is actually going to cost money to fix because unfortunately, the letters are actually pen mounted and liquid nailed in. So in terms to get those off, you would have to basically take them off the panel, replace the panel, and then get new letters because there's a chance that in taking the letters off, they might bend in terms of how secure they are right now.
All right. What does that cost?
We don't know yet.
Unfortunately, we just finalized this and we actually have it out to pricing with the general contractor. And hoping to have a cost early next week from them. And then an ETA, obviously with shipping and everything these days, it's kind of a moving target. So we're still working to get that as well.
And so because the slides are small, I don't know if anyone watching it, remotely can see that the issue is that when you're looking at it from the front door, because the word Lynwood Elementary go up, what you see on the tall part of the building is just the word elementary.
Correct.
And the idea is that you'd want Lynwood to be more prominently
Yes.
visual from the front
Yes.
of the school or as you're driving by?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, were there any questions in terms of the signage? Well, obviously, once pricing and lead time are available, we'll provide an update accordingly on
We'll be bringing
that.
back to
Is
the
this
board.
a-
We just wanted to make you aware of this at this point.
Is it a
Now I'm
time-sensitive
thinking every
change, or can it be changed at any time? Like if the decision would be, like
Not necessarily time sensitive at all.
there's nothing that would happen to the letters or the building if you decided to change it at a later time?
No.
Okay.
Do we still have that budget open for that building?
Okay, right, oh, right.
So there's
Yes.
still surplus funds,
Yes.
Oh, right,
contingency funds.
okay.
So we are literally talking about buying letters then, right? That's where we are.
And
So-
moving and installing through.
Right, yeah, so
Valves are
labor
free
and
then.
install, and then the actual lead time would be, the actual paneling, the siding, you would have to kind of replace and put over the existing in terms of how it's mounted. So the lead time with that is kind of the issue right now.
Do you know how much that one cost?
We'll talk about it.
I do not, I can get back to you though.
So why don't we get some numbers and, there's no rush here, right?
No.
No rush.
Okay. Can we move on to the plants then?
Yeah,
That'll be the
so,
plans.
Well, and that's actually more than plants, so this has the potential to be.
yeah,
a safety
yeah,
issue.
absolutely. So, in terms of
X Games.
how the school is set in the site plan, the grading, you see right here is the retaining wall, and behind the retaining wall is 15 feet down. So this is where the old school set, but with the grading of the new school and the second floor essentially being the main floor, there's a little bit of a drop there. Currently, right now, they have a masonry wall, which is actually taller than a standard handrail. I believe it's 52 inches, maybe 48 to 52 inches, so roughly around this tall, and maybe about 2 feet wide. So there is a worry in terms of a kid or somebody skateboarding trying to use this to make YouTube videos essentially, and how to prevent that from happening. So the paneling shown here would actually be face mounted on the existing and extend up to kind of break that and make it harder essentially for somebody to gain access to that wall. And then the gap in the paneling would make it basically impossible for anyone to kind of ride down the wall at that point. So that's the intent of this, is to kind of provide a little bit more protection of that wall, and then that drop down to the first floor on the other side. So again,
The coloring of it matches,
so the coloring would match the mullion, the gray of the
yeah.
windows and the exterior existing.
I know that, most of the skateboarders that I've seen in my life are very industrious, and whatever solution we come up with, I think would need to anticipate
Yeah, absolutely.
their tenacity. So is my understanding then that, I think you said there's about a 15-foot drop on the other side of the wall?
So where the grass goes into the actual retaining wall, it's a 15-foot drop down. With the retaining wall, that you would add essentially 4 feet. So it's around 19 to 20 feet
The
down.
potential there, I just want to point out, when we opened Chestnut Walled several years ago, the very first day that the building was open and we invited the community to come in, a resident, a woman, was standing on the stage, and she walked off the stage and broke her wrist. So if the potential is there, sooner or later, it'll happen.
Right.
So, I am concerned about the safety aspect there.
Absolutely.
That's a big drop.
Yep.
So I think we need to make sure whatever we put in is as foolproof as we can make it.
So in terms of pricing, we're actually, so all of, and again, this would be gray to match the gray mullions of the windows existing, and then the overhead fascia of the roof. And then the panels would lap back, again, to make it harder for anyone to kind of access the bottom of the wall as well.
And climb up, right? That's what the bottom is.
Right, so yeah,
Getting
where you
up.
turn and then you have the 3 panels up.
Yeah.
That would make it
As,
more
I know
possible to
my
skateboard.
kids know this, that like anything that has the potential of falling off of it freaks me out. And so I am all in favor of not having a worry that somebody would inadvertently like climb and fall off of this thing, so.
Yeah. And then there's actually another option, which isn't, it might be shown, where it's shrubbery, but the shrubbery and the bushes around the wall would be in addition to the paneling. But we would most likely do that at a later time to see if the initial fix is efficient enough.
Just curious, what's the spacing between the panels there?
The spacing between the panels, I believe, is 4 to 6 inches. I want to say it's 6 inches.
But if somebody were to climb over one of those panels, they could still skateboard down the whole thing, unless there were other panels or something at a right angle periodically.
Or little
Correct.
like speed bumps or things
They have,
like
yeah,
that.
they have those on the subways.
Yeah, I've seen those on, metal
Metro line,
surfaces or
exactly,
things
yeah.
like that, so nothing slides down.
And there is one of those at the bottom, right? There is a panel that's horizontal to the other ones.
Correct. Yeah, you can see it. It's actually, it dives back into the frame there,
Okay.
and kind of makes an L and then goes up.
If you had one of those on every one of them, it would be much more difficult to use it as a skateboard route.
Oh, you're on the inside, bringing it up the inside as well?
Yeah.
Okay. We can have the architect work on that, absolutely.
I mean, I think just the deterrent of, at the top, in terms of climbing up on it from the top, I think is a valid consideration in terms of responsibility for the project and, the safety of whoever might come by. It looks like there's, in addition to like someone who might skateboard, that it also provides a little bit more in terms of elevation so that there isn't any additional like climbing or whatnot.
Right. So I think it's just, it acts as more of a visual barrier for someone to prevent climbing or makes it harder.
Right.
Obviously, if someone is determined enough to get up there and climb, and once they get up there, they can do that.
Is there do we have a resource through our insurers at all for them to take a look at this and perhaps make some recommendations? They do this kind of thing all the time to minimize risk.
I will get back to you on that.
I can contact our broker.
That's a good suggestion.
Either that or you better just put a big trampoline right there.
There's no live.
I can get that priced up. So, yeah, again, just to repeat, so both are currently with the general contractor right now, and we're working with them to kind of get pricing and a timeline, and obviously, once available, we'll update you accordingly.
Sounds good. Any
Are
other
there-
questions?
Yep, sorry.
And those were the items for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.
You too. Next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak? You could come to the mic, state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Joy Baxter, 1713 Sue Ellen Drive, Havertown. I just want to say I thought John's presentation was excellent, and I think their company would be a really great resource. The thing I wanted to address was the idea of the SRECs and claiming of green and not. I have solar in my home. We're currently in the process of putting solar on our church, in my church, and the way that I see it is that by installing solar, you are increasing the fraction of renewable energy in Pennsylvania that's affecting the Pennsylvania grid and also in the nation and in the world. So the idea of claiming green energy, to me, is, I think it's good if you can't install solar, right? Because that's your only other option. But if you actually can install a renewable energy system, I don't see it as that important, but what you can claim is you are increasing the amount of renewable energy in the market. And so that's how I justify selling my SRECs. Everybody, it's going to be different for everybody exactly what you want to claim. But I just wanted to kind of add that into the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joy.
Any other speakers? Oh, thanks, Martha. Thanks, everybody. Do we need a motion to adjourn? No?
So moved.
We're done? Thank you all.
Thanks, Ben.